Hello, everyone. I'm Neale, and I've written a book called God Talk. It's part of the Common Sense series of books that talks all about the extraordinary experiences that human beings are having across the world in many areas of their lives. The area that I'm focused on most keenly has to do with our ability to communicate directly with God, with the higher power. I'm sure you do understand that 9 out of 10 people believe there is such a thing as a higher power, 8.5 to be statistically correct. Recent surveys have shown around the world that 8.5 people, 85% of the people in the world, believe when they're asked a question, is there a higher power, say yes, there's a higher power. But we can't seem to come to an agreement. We can't seem to somehow join with each other in our understanding of what that higher power is, what it wants, how it works, and how we can make it work in our lives. And that's what the book God Talk is all about, because as you may know, I wrote a series of books called Conversations with God, in which I had a direct dialogue with deity. And after that book became somewhat popular, I don't want to brag, but just saying it was read by people around the world, I was asked by the Common Sense publishing company, Sacred Stories, if I would write a book about how people could have their own conversation with God. So that's what this master class is all about, how you can have your own conversation with God. Could I start, please, by explaining to you who you are and who God is? And then we have a basis on which to really grapple with the experience of interacting with this essence that we call God. I believe that who we are is not this. That is, I don't think that I am my body. I don't think that I am my mind. I think that I have a body and I have a mind, but I think that these are tools. Could I say pieces of equipment used by who I really am, which is a spiritual entity. I believe who you are, who I am, and what every sentient being in the cosmos is a spiritual entity called by most of our religions a soul. And I believe that the soul is an individuation of divinity. I believe that the soul is an individual expression of God. Now, whenever I say that in a public lecture, someone is bound to say, oh, Neale, try to say that we are God. Come on. And I have to say, no, wait a minute. That's not really the essence of what I'm saying. I'm saying that we are a part of God. I'm saying that we are an aspect of God. I'm saying that we are an individuation of divinity. That we are for sure. And allow me, if I could, to use a metaphor that I was given in the Conversation with God dialogue. I was told to think of it in this way. Imagine a wave on the surface of the ocean, in the middle of the ocean. Not a wave landing on the beach someplace, but a wave in the middle of the ocean. Now, when a wave arises in the middle of the ocean, it's not separate from the ocean. It's not something other than the ocean. But of course, it's not the ocean itself either. It's simply an individuation of the ocean. It's a singular expression, if you will, of the ocean at large. And that singular expression is powerful, it's beautiful, it's dynamic, it's incredible to observe. And when the individual expression is complete, the ocean recedes, the wave recedes back into the ocean whence it came, to arise again on another day in another way. It's a wonderful metaphor that describes precisely your relationship with the divine, not something other than the divine. You're not the whole of God, but you are an individual expression of God, powerful and dynamic and beautiful in your own individual expression, for sure, more powerful than most people think that they are, but not the sum total of all the expressions that we would call God. And when we complete this particular expression, or if you please, this individual incarnation, my understanding is we return back into that which we call God. That is, we rejoin the divine, whence we came, to arise again on another day. Ah, yes, that's another aspect of what I've come to understand. I think we have more than one lifetime. Now, I know that's not a common belief. Many people, especially people who belong to certain religions, do not believe in reincarnation. And I'm not trying to convince anyone of anything, but I am simply sharing with you what I've come to understand as a result of my conversations with God. I'll talk to you about how I happen to have that conversation with God in another segment of this particular masterclass. But for now, let's just assume that I had that conversation. It's a conversation, by the way, we're all having. And so let's talk about that. Everyone is having a conversation with God all the time. We're simply calling it something else. And we have it more than once. We have it continuously through our lives. We might call it a sudden hunch, or a brilliant insight, or a fantastic idea. You might even call it women's intuition, or a psychic hit. We have all these different names for this experience because we don't want to call it what it really is, because we don't want to be marginalized or, thought of in a strange way. So, who do we think we are that God is talking directly to us? So we say, no, I had an epiphany. That's it. That's a good word. I had an epiphany, a sudden insight. Well, where did that come from? Because often, very often, it's an insight or it's an idea that we never had before. It came from somewhere else. It did not come from something we read somewhere else or thought of before or were told years ago. It just came, if you please, out of the blue. So we call that, or at least I call that, a conversation with God. Now, who and what is God? Good question. Who and what is God? Is God some guy in the sky, who has long white hair and a white beard and often wears blue shirts and glasses without frames and looks a little bit like, no, God is not a guy in the sky, in my understanding. My understanding is that God is an essence. I want to call it the essential essence. That God is an energy that we can define, that we can actually describe, that we can feel. And it's an energy that is self-conscious, that is, it is self-aware. It's an energy that can direct itself. It can cause itself to take any shape or form that it pleases, and more than one shape or form at a time. And so God can appear, and I want to suggest to you has appeared, looking exactly like the sentient beings on any and every planet in the cosmos at any given point in what you and I call time. So I think that God is the sum total of all of it, all of life. That God is the energy of life itself, having placed itself into life in all the forms that we see here on Earth, and as I said, all over the cosmos. And that's my understanding of who and what God is. The essential essence, the source, the beginning, and the end of all things. To which, by the way, there really is no end. I'm glad I happened to just use that word, the end of all things, because in fact, there's no such thing as the end of all things. Nothing ends, because everything in existence, I'm told, is a circle. So we like to think of things as a straight line, has a beginning, then it has an end. But in fact, my understanding is that we take that straight line and God said, bring it up to the top, connect it together, and you wind up with a circle. And that everything I'm told in existence, again, to use a metaphor, is circular. Where does the circle begin? Where does the circle end? Ah, nowhere. The circle always was, is now, and always will be. There is no beginning and there is no end. And the same is true. Now, here comes the interesting part of all this. The same is true of your soul. Your soul has no beginning and it has no end. It always was, is now, and always will be. Some religions refer to this always will be factor as eternal life. In fact, many religions, I'm going to say most, the largest number of the world's religions, teach of an afterlife, a so-called afterlife. They teach when this particular experience, which we call our physical expression, is complete, our metaphysical expression or our spiritual expression continues and goes on forever until the soul decides to reincarnate, that is, to become physical once again. And I'm going to suggest to you, as I was told in conversations with God, that we have done that many times, not 2 or 3 times, but I'm told hundreds of times across the span of what we call time, which is another whole story because time does not exist in the way that we think that it does. That's another whole masterclass we're not going to get into right now. But to know that your existence continues forever, and that's a self-aware existence. That is, when we do the thing that we popularly call die, we don't go to some amorphous place where we're, like with our heads in the clouds and don't really know what's going on. I'm told that in this other place, in the metaphysical location that many people call heaven or paradise or bliss, or nirvana, we are self-aware. That is, we maintain our identity. Our sense of ourself is what I'm trying to say. We maintain our sense of who we are. Even though the individual expression from lifetime to lifetime may change, along with it, the individual identity. In this particular lifetime, I'm calling myself Neale Donald Walsch. In a previous identity, I might have been a lady, or I might have been another guy who called himself by a different name. Have you ever had the experience of deja vu? You know what deja vu is? And the French call it, it's an interesting human experience where it looks like something that you've encountered in your life today, you've experienced before. You ever had that experience where it feels like, wait a minute, this has all happened before. I've seen this before. It was happening just the way it's happening right now. I had that experience. I've had it many times, actually, but I had it profoundly one day a few years ago when I was in Copenhagen. I was there to give a lecture. My wife and I were traveling around Europe, but I'm walking down the street in Copenhagen, and I realized, wait a minute. You know what? Forgive me. Please forgive me. I misstated that. I wasn't in Copenhagen. I was in Hamburg. I'm remembering now all the details. I was in Hamburg, and I was walking down the street in Hamburg. And I came to a corner, and I said to my wife, I can tell you what's around the next corner, even though it was the first time we had been there on this trip. And I described a big building that I imagined to be around the next corner, some kind of a government building, a library or whatever it was. But I described it with the pillars and the steps and so forth. We turned around that corner just to see if I was right about it, and there it was, exactly as I had described it, the building on our right. And my wife said to me, how could you possibly know? How could you describe that building in such detail? And I said to her, I've been here before. This is a major building, and I've been here before. We've all had, I shouldn't say we've all had, I'm going to say many people have had experiences called deja vu, what the French call deja vu. I've seen it before. I've been here before. And it's entirely possible that that experience is an indication of a previous lifetime or of having the same experience in this particular lifetime. So there's more going on here than meets the eye. That's what I want to share with you about our life on earth. Guys, if you don't get anything else out of what I've just said here in the past 15 minutes or so, let me say this. There's more going on here than meets the eye. You are more than you think you are. God is much different than what we think God is. I want to share with you that I think that we can solve much of the challenge that we're facing as humanity, our political, our economic, our social, and even our spiritual differences and our spiritual, economic, social, and political problems. We can solve many of those by simply changing our definition of God. I want to suggest that we have defined God in all the wrong way. I want to suggest that God could be defined and should be defined, should be redefined. We should create a new definition of God and use two words to define God. Here are the two words. God is an energy, as I said, that can be felt and can be experienced and can be described. The two words, pure love. Pure love. I'm going to suggest that God is pure love. Now that's, also something that usually evokes a response from an audience when I'm saying this in front of a crowd. Somebody in the back of the room will say, Neale, are you trying to tell us we've been listening to you for 20 minutes to tell us that God is love? This is your great revelation. We all know that God is love. All the religions of the world, even those that have doctrinal differences, agree that God is love. And I have to say to my audience member, wait, I didn't say that. I didn't say God is love. I said God is pure love. And my friend in the audience will say, okay, what's the difference? Pure love is a love that needs, expects, requires, and demands nothing in return. Therefore, it is not judgmental. This is a God that is not judgmental, nor is it a God that is condemning, nor is it a God that's punishing. Dare we believe in a God that does not judge, condemn, and punish us? That's theologically revolutionary. That throws all the cards up in the air. It turns over all the tables. It's a table turning over idea. It turns over the apple cart of most of the world's religions because it invites us to believe in a whole different kind of God. Why is that important? Because we are told by most of the world's religions that we should seek to be divine. At least we should seek to express divine behaviors. Yes, most religions invite us to express divine behaviors. But if we think that the divine behaves in a loving way that includes judgment, condemnation, and punishment, we will do the same thing with each other. We will include judgmental condemnation and punishment in our interactions with each other, and we're doing it every day. We've had armed conflict on this planet for all of but 2% of recorded history. But if we imagine a God who does not judge, condemn, or punish us for anything at any time, but welcomes us back home at the end of our incarnation, yes, no matter what we have done while we were here, even the prodigal son is allowed back home, invited back home, embraced back home, and offered another opportunity in a different incarnation to announce and to declare, to express and fulfill, to become and to experience who it really is, to demonstrate itself as an individuation of divinity. That's what I want you to know about who you are and who and what God is. And in part 2 of this masterclass, we'll talk about my lilac story, something that's actually better than lilacs. I can't wait to see you then. Join us for part 2. Until then, I'm Neale. Bye for now.